SYA, what's up? Welcome to the Sidecast that we are calling To Bay or Not To Bay. That is the question that we're talking about today. And relationships, we know this, are the topic for you guys. We get asked about this all the time, and it's something that we find ourselves counseling you guys on the most. And so we know that y'all care and we care. So we're going to talk about these two things, or a lot of these things today. When I think about this, I think about two ends of the spectrum, right? Either you are someone like Dusty, who has been married for many years and has, in my opinion, a very, very healthy marriage, one that I strive to seek in my own, and who has a family and is in full-time ministry. And then you have someone on the other end of the spectrum, like Adrianna, who, in my opinion, has very, very, in a very healthy way, has pursued Jesus within her singleness and navigating that as a single person. And so you may be listening to this and watching this on both sides, or one of the two sides today. So we want to talk about some things. The first topic that we're going to do is we're going to talk about dating. And so the first question, Dusty, that I have for you is about communication. The question is, we hear a lot that communication is so important in a relationship. What is some advice for communicating well?
Yeah, and I would say that for me, as someone who's counseled young adults about this, I'd say 9 out of 10 questions about relationships somehow connects to communicating or miscommunicating and creating conflict. So lots of things to say about this, but here's a few. Self-awareness is key. You knowing how you actually communicate, not so much yet how you want to be able to communicate, but how you actually do it. So here's a few questions to ask yourself. Are you a verbal processor or are you a mental processor? Do you have a short fuse during conflict, or are you very patient? I don't understand y'all that are very patient. How did your parents communicate and handle conflict? And you may say, oh, but I'm nothing like my parents. But listen, you embody your upbringing. This is just true. It doesn't mean you're destined in this way, but you need to acknowledge that. Were you modeled by your family a listen patiently and speak during your turn, like wait for the person to finish? Or were you modeled that like everybody interrupts and gets louder so they can be heard? All of that is really, really important. That's reality. And you need to start as a base with how you actually communicate. When you listen to people describe their personality, they'll talk as if they kind of all worked it out logically. Like, well, I've always done this because, and then they give logic. So a lot of times when a guy and a girl are dating and they're having communication problems, there's a presupposition problem. They think that they communicate the way they do because, well, it's logical. And so they immediately interpret the way this person communicates as illogical and as wrong. And so you've got to have or begin to build not just self-awareness, but some listening skills, some empathy skills, and some affirmation skills, like being able to say back, listen well, so that you can be able to say, okay, I think what I hear you saying, right? And let me look at my notes here. Empathy, listening skills, and affirmation, all of that would be under the umbrella of humility. Because you've got to be able to make an assumption that you don't know everything, that you might have misinterpreted them. So you want to listen really well so you can actually hear what they're saying, understand it, process back, and then explain your way. There's so much more to say about communicating, but here's how I want to end this question or answer. Spend whatever money and time you need to like build into those skills of listening, affirmation, of empathy, all of those things. Like spend that time, spend that money, and assume that your way is your way, but it's not the right way. It's just your way. And your significant other, your date, the person you're in a relationship with, they don't necessarily communicate wrong. They just communicate differently. I'm gonna stop there.
All right. Yeah. The difference between knowing what's the way and a way is super important. And I love that you talked about putting time and money and energy into those things. I'll field this question that came in. It says, to become the kind of person I would want to date, I would need to become financially stable. How much should money affect my decision for getting married? A lot of these questions, I know for me, I'll probably give you what I can, but when it comes to something more logical, but I'm going to give you my own experience, a lot of it too. Money, it's important. I'm not going to say it's not, but it wasn't a deciding factor. With Jess and I, when we first got engaged, we actually had set a longer engagement date further out. And after a week of just kind of being excited, but also praying about it, we kind of just said, you know what, let's not be driven by money. Let's not allow our desire to be married and to honor God with our relationship as a husband and wife. Let's not let that come down to money. And we stepped out in faith and set an earlier date, and God was faithful and everything worked out. And I'll say this, money and finances, they change. Whether you get a new job, you lose a job, something happens and you have to spend some money on something that was unexpected. We had a baby and our finances changed tremendously. Money and finances change, but what doesn't change is our love for Jesus, our desire to be the best husband and wife, and our desire to continually grow our marriage. And so I share this. This question is important to me because I've sat down with a few young adult guys over the past few years that they ask this question and they almost get like crippled by this, like, will I be making enough money to have a wife kind of thing? And I kind of give this example, like in my office at Shepherd, I'm sitting across on the second floor across from like the shopping center, and there's like a Ralph's across there. And a couple of times I've sat across one of these young adult men and I've pointed to that Ralph and I said, you know what, there's a guy that's probably bagging groceries at Ralph's right now that has a wife and like 3 kids, and he's making it work. They're making it work because it's worth it. And they haven't allowed finances to be the deciding factor in their marriage. It's important and it's something that should be talked about. But it shouldn't be the deciding factor. And that's my take on that question. But we're going to keep moving on this topic of marriage. And this question is for Dusty. Has there been a time when you've doubted your love for your spouse?
Excuse me. Yes.
I'm going to get my notepad. Hold on. I'm going to write these down too. Just
I'm ready. I'm ready for this.
Yeah. And just so everybody knows, we are going to ask Adri questions. She doesn't just get to sit here and listen to us
and just
talk.
Be like, yes.
Yeah. And people who say that they haven't, whether they're dating or married, have they ever, doubted their love for their significant other? If they say no, they're either lying or they're just thinking something else than at least what I'm thinking, which my way of thinking isn't always right. But because you've doubted your love, because I'm going to answer this question literally, have I ever doubted my love for Amy, my wife? And yes, I have. But I want to preface it with whatever kind of doubt you end up perceiving. That doesn't mean, I'm going to talk about marriage. That doesn't mean that you're thinking divorce or I'm not committed and faithful to this person anymore. Because real marriage, like actual marriage, is hard. Like living together is hard, which should be done only in marriage as a follower of Jesus. But you're sharing control of your life.
Yeah.
You're seeing the truly wonderful and the truly, at times, wicked within this other human being. And so it's family. Like you're doing it right now in your family, even though you're not married. Just because there's romance involved and attraction, it's still very, very similar to family. So, but this isn't why I say, yes, I've doubted my love for Amy. In 22 years of being married, there have been very clear moments, like in our marriage, that I was not loving Amy well, and the way that I want to, and the way that I've been called to. So I doubted my love. Now, it wasn't like, again, it's not a doubt of, I don't know if I want to be married at all anymore or to Amy anymore. Like I would consider, I'm not saying those thoughts can't happen to people, but I would consider for me to entertain a thought like that I would have to devolve into some pretty deep character flaws that I just don't have right now. So my habits moving upward in a relationship from back when I was y'all's age have I think insulated and helped me and protected me from having those deep dark thinkings. But I've doubted my love because I've seen that I didn't love her in the way I should at different times in our marriage. And so I've had to stop and go, okay, this is reality. Here's what I'm doing, what I'm saying, how I'm responding here, but here's what the need is. And so for me, it's a deep dive back into some basic habits of like taking care of and showing care for the most important human person in my life. And that doesn't ever get easier, by the way, because each new moment that you might go, you might doubt your love, the way you're loving your spouse, each new season is very different. And and then I'll say this, I would assume that what the person and most people mean by, because I've been asked that quite a bit, have you ever doubted your love for your wife? I think what people mean is, you didn't doubt it when you were dating and engaged and you first got married because you knew that they're the one or whatever. But have you ever doubted it since? I think what most people prescribe to in American culture is that there's this magic destined thing, soulmates and this one right person. And I'm not going to preach that because I have already, but I am going to reference something. If you want to watch a whole series on that we did about a year or two ago, go to, here it is, vimeo.com/channels/WeAreSYA/videos. And that'll get you right to it. Just look for relationship goals. But yes, you will doubt certain things about your relationship, about your love. You might doubt their love for you, especially early on. All of that happens because you're human. It doesn't happen necessarily because, we're not meant to be together. She's not the one. He's not the one. Doubts happen because we're humans. If the first disciples of Jesus in Matthew 28, it says some of them worshiped him after he resurrected. They saw him with their own eyes. Some of them, or they worshiped, but some of them doubted.
Yeah.
Those guys doubted Jesus, seeing him resurrected. Exactly. Then, we're going to doubt our love, our spouse's love. So doubts are okay. So yes, I've had doubts about my love and what I expected and thought. Especially being married this long. I'll stop here. But I have an expectation of who I am and how I am in marriage. And yet because we brought little humans into our family now for in a week, it'll be 16 years of having kids. That changes the game. Right. And so Amy needs me and my care and attention right now in a very different way than she did when we were 25. Yeah. We were married at 21 and 22. Yeah. And so there's been times even in the last couple of years where I've went man, if you'd have asked me, do you love your wife? Absolutely. I love my wife. But do I have times where I go, Frizzell, I don't know that you really love her the way you're supposed to. You need to change some things. And that's okay. Those are good. So I'm going to stop there.
Cool. That was money, bro. I don't know how I would have answered that question, but I agree. I have had those moments as well. And so it resonates with me as well. I'm going to move on to the topic of purity, really. And this question is for you, Adri. Finally, we get to ask the question, Adri. Yes. Get your popcorn ready. The question for you is, I've heard of some people that don't even kiss before marriage. What do you think is a good boundary for physical intimacy while dating?
I'm ready for this one. Well, first of all, I don't think that there is one physical boundary that is the overall standard for all of mankind in dating. So I'm already not going to answer the question the way that you posed it. And I'm sorry, but that's facts. We've talked about this before. We've talked about purity and dating. And I have a whole sermon on purity that you can look up, which I go in depth about boundaries and dating and relationships. And that's on our YouTube channel. We are SYA, a shameless plug. Go check it out. But I think that this question comes back to self-awareness, as Dusty already talked about. It's a huge part of relationship and your physical boundaries. You may not struggle in certain areas of physical purity that others do, or even the person that you're gonna date or are dating right now. You might not need as extreme boundaries as a person who doesn't kiss until they're married. But honestly, I can tell you that they don't have regrets about that now. Like, honestly, they're probably better off because of it. Nobody has issues with too much boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not the question here.
Mm-hmm.
So what I suggest for you is to map out your ideal relationship boundaries, because if you don't make those boundaries that you want to have in a relationship now, even if you're not in it, they will be made for you, like by mistake or regret or shame, because you are a human being. Like, you are across the board. Nobody is perfect. Mm-hmm. So map out those ideal relationship boundaries now. And what I mean by that is really literal. At 2 months, here are my physical boundaries. This is what I would allow for myself. I know my past. I'm aware of my triggers. I'm aware of my strengths and my weaknesses. 2 months, this is here. And pray about it with the Lord. God, or do you approve of this? Do you approve of this boundary? Mm-hmm. And then do 6 months. At 6 months, this is where what I feel like the Lord is calling me to. And then a year. And then engaged. You better do engaged, because it's only going to get harder from there. And then marriage. And don't just stop at physical. Do emotional and spiritual too, which I talk about in the sermon. And then when you're dating, the most important part is to share what you've written with a mentor so that they can hold you accountable. And I say mentor because, yes, share with your peers and they can help to hold you accountable, but it's difficult for your peers to hold you accountable for something that they're probably struggling in as well. So get a mentor in your life, someone who has that kind of experience and success and wisdom to really hold you accountable with something that you may be struggling in or that you want to grow in. So be self-aware, map it out. Some other things that I said in the sermon, but you can look back and watch, is clearly communicate those boundaries, get accountability, have a curfew. Like, I know you're not 12, but you got to be wise. Just be smart. Come on. Like, nothing good happens after midnight. So have a curfew, be alone, but in public.
But you ain't 12, but you definitely can still be stupid.
You act like it sometimes.
Stupid
but
knows no boundaries of age.
But yeah, basically, that's it.
Real talk. If you guys, I'm not even kidding, and I've said this, and Dusty's probably said it too. I know he has. One of the best sermons I've ever heard on purity from Adri. So if you get a chance, go find that sermon and check it out. I promise you, you'll be blessed. Another question.
And she's lived this. So I think it's good. Some people have lofty ideas about purity. Adri's lived it. Mm-hmm. And so that's good. That's real good.
Yes, sir. The next question is for you, Dusty. This one says, myself and the person I'm dating both truly love God and are active at church with accountabilities. But we have a sexual past together, and it's hard for both of us to let go of each other. What do you do when the feeling is mutual about purity in the Lord, but our approach getting physical is wrong?
Yeah. I really like this question only because it's some self-awareness is built into it. And so some of you that are watching this or listening to this may be in that place. And if you're able to admit it to yourself, like, we both really love the Lord. We've messed up in the past, either when we weren't as close to the Lord, or maybe we were, and we've made these choices. And that's how you word it for yourself. Language is very important. You make sure to rid yourself of, we fell into sin. We fell into temptation. Like, language matters.
Yeah.
The devil, threw things at us. Regardless of whether those things are true, you made a choice at the end of the day. Yep. And so you did as a couple. And so how do you pursue purity even though you're still struggling? I'm going to be, especially since I don't have this specific couple or any of you couples with me right now to where I can engage some of my empathy. I'm going to be a little bit blunt, and the Holy Spirit can do what he needs to do with you personally. But it could be that if you are continuing to struggle, because this person says they have accountability at church. So if you either have, you might have bad accountability, you may have mentors in your life that just don't call you out, push further or whatever. But if you have accountability, you're still struggling and all of that, you may not need to be dating. And it's not so much that you're not meant for each other. You might not be meant for anybody right now. If that, and again, not that you're like worse than everybody else because you like this person so much, because again, there is also that, like maybe you messed around sexually before either of you got close to the Lord. And then now you're in this new season of following Jesus, but that makes things much more difficult. Again, you may not need to be dating right now, but that doesn't mean ever with each other or with anybody else. This was Amy and I, and I'm not going to give the whole background, but like not knowing the Lord, either of us, not having sex, but doing plenty of other things sexually together. When we dated, when we came to Jesus, there were some struggles. And one of our solutions based on some, what I think was good wisdom was, you may just need to not date and kind of see what happens. But if you're going to do that, you need to do some boundaries on not dating each other. Like you have to actually treat each other like you're not dating. Okay. That doesn't mean you treat each other bad. You don't treat other people you're not dating bad. But you can't be calling each other all the time. You can't be getting in the car together alone and going and talking as friends, you've got to take a break and work on you, because that's the only person you can control. You can't control them. So you work on you. If you're not going to do that, or I should word that better, because that's not always what you should do. If you're not going to do that because you both feel like you shouldn't, if you feel like maybe you took 2 steps forward, but you're always taking 1 step back, I would evaluate what your accountability is. Because just as a more either arrogant or overconfident spiritual leader, I would want to know. I'd be like, okay, what's the accountability? What are the boundaries you have? Jesus said, Matthew 5, your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Right, be extreme. And I've done that at your age. And so in terms of my boundaries that were really uncomfortable, super not fun, not what I wanted. And so I would want to question that. So if you're not going to stop dating, I would look at Matthew 5. I would read Jesus's words. It's specifically about adultery, but it fits for any of this. I would look at what extremes have we gone to protect our purity together, to pursue it together. What you may find, and I'll stop here, what you may find, even if you decide to continue dating, not only might you find it, you probably should find that if you're going to continue dating, you're going to have to date very differently. And that will feel like a death. It will feel like, and it should. You may have to rediscover each other. And that's okay. Because if you don't, and if it's boring and without sexual activity, you're kind of like, I don't really know if I'm attracted anymore. Well, praise the Lord that you all took it serious. And then you kind of find out, like, I don't know that I want to be in a relationship anymore with this person based on interests and other things outside of the physical. There's a couple things. I'm going to stop there.
I love that. And again, for me to tag that a little bit, at your guys' age, this whole parking the relationship, like park it for a minute, is beneficial on both conclusions. Like, it's beneficial because what he's talking about is maybe you realize it's going to be painful, but you're going to become better. But also, I've experienced this where I parked the relationship, and the result was I don't need to be with this person anymore for myself and for them. And it actually made it easier to deal with because I asked the Lord to reveal to me what I needed to do and park that relationship. And then when it ended, I didn't have that gut-wrenching pain of like it breaking, this whole breakup moment. It was like, no, we were separate. We were kind of like parking the relationship and doing what we needed to do. And now I feel better. And so that's another recommendation about like actually maybe considering parking the relationship for a season and a time and allowing God to work through you and through that relationship.
That's a classic Jeff Cravens. Like Jeff does so good at coming up with phrases. Like seriously, like I mean, he's a poet and a lyricist. So, but parking the relationship. That's a great potential idea.
You go to Disneyland. You don't just like go. You don't get out your car and land at like, at Disneyland. You got to park the car. You got to walk. You got to get off the tram, get out the tram, walk again, get in the line, get in the park. You got to do a lot of things.
This is a future sermon right here.
I'm telling you, I think this isn't even written down. This is just straight off the dome right here. Look, you got to do a lot of work to get to all the joy of relationship.
Yes.
Okay.
That's good. That's real good.
Okay. I will say a little bit, about purity. And this is kind of me going back to something I've talked about before. But I like one-liners, and Dusty just said it, like about being a little bit more lyrical with things. But sometimes I think one-liners are like the noodle that sticks, right? When you throw it against the wall. And so I'll say this, when it comes to purity, my reminder for you guys is to check all the places from your head to your laces. And by that, I mean your mind, your heart, and your feet. When it talks about mind, James 1:14 says, but each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. And so just a reminder that your desires start in your mind, start in the mind. And with your heart, Jeremiah 17 says the heart is deceitful above all things. And John 3 talks about whenever our heart condemns us, not if our heart condemns us, our heart can condemn us. And sometimes it will. And so Proverbs, which is a book on wisdom, is reminding us to guard our hearts. And then your mind, your heart, and your feet, just going back to that whole James verse, desires lead to action. This is science, right? Your hands and your feet cannot go rogue and make their own decisions. Your mind has to like tell your body what to do. That's just how your body works. And so again, your bodies can only do what your minds have communicated it to do. So just a simple reminder when it comes to your own purity and your relationship, just remember to check all the places from your head to your laces. That's it. I'm gonna stick with that. We do have a question for Adri that is very important. It says, how do you find contentment being single?
I love this. I mean, I love all my questions, obviously, but I'm going to say that every single time. But I am very passionate. I am very passionate about this question because I've been single most of my life.